Thanks. Okay, let's get started. It's 3 o'clock. It's actually a minute afterwards. So we'll call to order, and I think you can get the quorum.
Yes, sir.
It looks like I can even figure we got a quorum. So let's move on to the invocation. Jesse.
Thanks, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. If you can please bow your heads. Dear Lord, we are thankful for this day that you have given us, for its blessings, its opportunities, its challenges. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing important responsibilities. We ask that you would guide our thoughts and our actions so that we may have a successful meeting of the CPS Energy Rate Advisory Committee. Help us to accomplish our goals while displaying your character. Help us to do good, to be honest, to serve others, and to fulfill our obligations to our community. We pray these things in your name. Amen.
Okay, opening remarks. Rudy.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. I know y'all have plenty to discuss amongst yourselves, so I'm not going to, belabor, the point. Yesterday was our last session with council before they consider this in mid-January. A lot of work to do between then and now. Tonight will be District 9 Town Hall, and they'll be scattered throughout between now and then. So anyway, we continue to get good feedback. I look forward to the feedback the RAC has. The feedback in the form of the presentation back to the board. That will happen when Corey and I present the rate case formally to our board on January the 10th. Reed and the new CAC chair will have opportunities to address the board at that time, and we will forward the collection of information we get back from y'all to the board and council as soon as Ann pulls it all together, and we'll slap a cover memo on it from your chair, and we'll proceed. So again, thank you for your consideration. I recognize that the process was somewhat iterative and frustrating for you all, and I just appreciate you hanging in there with us. Again, once we get past this process, whatever that outcome may be, we will immediately pivot to the other items on your list of things to do in terms of your charges for the board. So just commit to you. Council keeps on harping on a timeline. I want to make sure that the timeline that we present them is a timeline you feel good about. So there's no hesitation on my part to give them something, but I want it to be something that has received your thoughtful input. So just know that I'm committed to your process to allow you to do the work that it will come from here going forward. So willing to answer any questions you have. I don't think we need to present any more information to you today. I just I look forward to your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudy. Hey, just a little housekeeping here, how we're going to do this. First, we've got a presentation from Brattle on the energy burden, specifically on this rate increase. So we'll do that. We will then take the rest of the meeting, and I'll go through and I'll call each person. They'll tell us what their vote is and then read their comments. It's important that these comments be read. Everyone needs to hear them. They need to be on the record. This will be the base of what gets reported, because as I've tried to say time and again, the objective of this group is for individuals that have to make decisions, that actually have authority to make a decision, hear your voice. And hopefully this will allow your voice to be heard and in a way that is meaningful and documented in a way that you can't say, well, I just didn't hear, okay? They need to hear. With that, then I would turn it over to however we're going to get the presentation started. Ann, I don't know if it's behind me already? Okay.
Adrian, do you have the presentation ready to pull up? Adrian, do you have the presentation ready to pull up?
Yes, ma'am. It should be pulled up now.
And it is, thank you.
Okay, and do we need to queue somebody up, or?
I'm more than happy to start talking, Reed.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm relieved. I was afraid I was going to have to say something. Go ahead.
All right, well, thank you very much. We will present here the analysis we have done of the likely impact of certain rate changes on energy affordability. And besides me on this conversation, I would like to acknowledge the role that my colleagues Travis and Rohan have played. They're both on the line as well, and we'd be happy to take questions as we roll along. So next slide, please, Adrian. So just as a point of reference, I want to mention that what we're going to do in this conversation at a high level, just reinforcing what you already know, is we're going to assess the likely impact of rate changes on the energy burden of the first and second income quintiles within the CPS Energy service area. How are we defining the energy burden? We are using the ACEEE definition of the energy burden, which is widely used throughout the country. ACEEE, as you may know, stands for the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. It publishes reports, documents, holds conferences and webinars, has been doing that for decades. And they have sort of institutionalized the definition of the energy burden as a simple metric. It is a ratio of the annual expenditure on electricity and natural gas that a household incurs divided by the household income. So it's a very simple metric, a cost for energy in the numerator, income in the denominator. It's gross annual household income, and the numerator has energy costs for electricity and natural gas. It does not include gasoline, even though there's some talk in the future about including gasoline. Right now, it is just electricity and natural gas. It's an annual number, and it can be computed for the median income households or by quintile. And we will get to that in a moment. But let me also bring to your attention the fact that ACEEE defines a ratio of 6% as being high. In other words, if the ratio is 6%, it's the threshold. Ideally, it would be less than 6%. If it hits 6%, it's high. If it hits 10%, it is severe. And as we have shared with you in the past, for certain income quintiles, lower ones, the first and the second ones, it can be much higher than even 10% for CPS Energy and for other utilities. And you will recall we have also shown you how it varies by census tract. So this is nothing new. We're using the same definition as before. Just wanted to put that up there as a refresher, if you will, before we dive into assessing the impact of the rate changes. Next, please. Next slide. Okay, thank you. So at every income quintile, households in San Antonio are less well off than households in other Texas cities. So this is just a chart about incomes and how they're distributed through the quintiles and what is the magnitude of the incomes in San Antonio versus Austin, Dallas, and Houston. Those are the three other cities we are using as benchmarks in this conversation, just like we had done in the previous one. We are using data at the county level for incomes. That is the closest we can come to getting income data from a standard US governmental source. In this case, it is the American Community Survey for 2019, which is published by the US Census Bureau. The average third income quintile household in San Antonio earns a 73% as much as the average third income quintile household in Austin, so about 3/4. And the third income quintile you can think of as being like a median. So there's the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. The third one is in the center of gravity, measure of central tendency. And the observation we have is the San Antonio households are making about 3/4 of what similar households in Austin are making. The average fifth income quintile household, that's in other words, the top end, earns 67% of 2/3 as the average fifth income quintile household in Austin, but as much as the average fifth income quintile household in Dallas or Houston. In other words, there is comparability at the fifth quintile, but not San Antonio is the bar shown on the very left, the solid blue, dark blue bar. It is consistently lower across all income quintiles. And that's just the denominator of the percentage computation that will give us the energy burden. So that's just as a point of reference. Next slide. We have carried out an analysis of 2 rate increases that CPS Energy provided to us for analysis purposes. The first one is an increase in the base rate. The second one is a change in the fuel cost recovery mechanism. And I'll talk momentarily about the specifics of those. And we have computed those impacts before the ADP program increase kicks in. And then we have recomputed them when the ADP program increase is allowed for. ADP offsets the increase, as you know. It is directed specifically at lower income customers. So let me just briefly comment on these 3 factors that are shown in the table. The base rate increase that's being proposed is 3.85%, effective the 1st of March next year. This will result in a revenue increase of $73 million to the utility to help them improve infrastructure resiliency, technology, and staffing. The second item is fuel cost recovery. A surcharge of $1.26 per month is being proposed effective March 1st of next year to recover fuel costs due to the winter storm Uri over a 25-year period. So as opposed to recovering it all in one lump sum amount, is being spread out over 25 years. It's $1.26 per month per customer. The offsetting factor is the proposed changes to the ADP increases overall enrollment by 14,000 customers and adds an additional discount of $3.84 per month for customers. So the discount increase added up to the previous discount becomes $16.14 per month. Next slide, please. In 2019, customers in the first and second income quintiles paid more than $1,000 for energy annually before any discounts were applied. I'm showing you 2 bars. One is for the first quintile. The second one is for the second quintile. Within the first bar, the dark blue color is the electricity base rate, the charge for that. The next one is the electricity variable charge. So the 2 of them at the bottom 2 bars or slabs within the bars are for electricity. The dominant source clearly is the base rate. And then there is at the top the gas base rate charge. And at the very bottom, a little sliver is the gas variable rate charge. Electricity costs make up 85% of the total energy bills for customers in these 2 income quintiles. Base rates, as seen in the graph, account for the largest portion of the electricity and gas bills. Customers in the first and second income quintiles faced a negative variable charge for gas service in 2019 due to a negative fuel adjustment. So just to clarify, the gas variable charge is actually below the zero line, and it's a small number and it's negative. Okay. So those are the reference numbers that existed in 2019. And what we will do now is simulate what would have happened if the two rate changes we were discussing on the previous slide had been implemented in 2019. Next slide, please. So what is our methodology for doing this impact computation? It's very straightforward, and the table on the right shows the details, which will be for your reference. Let me just tell you at a higher level how we did the math. So what we did was we applied a 3.85% change in the base rate to the most economically vulnerable customers. That's what the focus we had for this analysis. First and second income quintile customers, in other words. We used the 2019 customer bill data from CPS Energy to estimate the share of base rates from electricity and gas bills, as I showed you in the bar chart previously. And then what we did was we said, okay, how much of that is the base rate? And then we applied the 3.85% factor to the base rate to derive the total bill impact of the proposed base rate increase of 3.85%. Okay. So you begin with $1143 on the right side for electricity is the first row. That's 75.76% of the bill. So what is the amount of the base rate charge? It is $866. Apply the 3.85%. That translates into $33. New amount is $899. You add that to the other portion of the bill, and the new total bill is $1176. So in other words, we have gone from $1143 to $1176 as a result of this 3.85% factor. Okay. We do something similar for gas. Gas, of course, as you know, is a small portion of the total bill. The bulk of it is electricity. Next slide, please. So the impact of rate changes in the first income quintile is shown here. The 2019 energy burden, which had a $1,230 per month ADP discount, is 8.6% compared to 8.7% with the proposed changes to the base rate, the fuel cost recovery, and ADP of $16.14. In other words, that's the composite effect of these elements. So as shown in the graph, it's like a waterfall chart that I'm sure you have seen in other studies. We begin with the energy burden. It goes up. The small little sliver in green, that's the base rate increase, which I had showed you in the previous table. Then comes the fuel cost recovery, which is the small sliver next to it. In other words, that's the third bar. And then comes the total impact, which is the second big blue bar. And then we have the ADP benefit before the increase. And then comes the ADP benefit, higher benefit with the increase. And then when all is said and done, we get the bar on the very right. So just to summarize, what we have is the energy burden hasn't changed that much because of the ADP discount kicking in, going up, and kind of neutralizing, mitigating, diluting what otherwise would have been somewhat of an impact, as shown before. So the ADP is very helpful. Without the ADP, so if you just look at the big picture, there are three blue bars. Bar on the very left is before the increase. The bar in the middle, the big blue bar, is the increase. And then the ADP comes in, and you see the bar on the right. Next slide, please. This table basically provides the details of the computations. And you can see when all is said and done that there is a change in the annual energy cost of $7 for customers in the first income quintile. I mean, it does go up. It was up by $7. Next slide, please. We follow a similar approach for customers in the second income quintile. We're just working with slightly different data on income for those customers, slightly different data on how much electricity they consume, and therefore the numbers are slightly different. But the analysis is using exactly the same approach. So I guess intuitively, I hope it makes sense. Basically, the ADP is coming in. If ADP was not coming in, you would see bills going up. As a result of the ADP, results are much, much more mild. Next slide, please. So this table provides similar analysis, and when all is said and done, the change in annual energy cost is going to be $17. And you can see all the computations there. Next slide, please. So how do we sum up the analysis? These are the key takeaways. Just to reinforce what we have been saying, that we're looking specifically at two factors. One is the 3.85% increase in base rates, and the $1.26 is the fuel cost recovery surcharge over the next 25 years. We quantify the impact of the change in the base rate and the fuel cost recovery on the energy burden of the customers in the first and second income quintiles. We found that the energy burden for customers in the first and second income quintiles increases to 10% and 5% respectively. After we account for the impact of the current and proposed ADP programs, the energy burden falls to 8.7% and 3.9% for customers in the first and second income quintile. The increases in the proposed ADP program reduce the combined impact of these rate changes by 86% and 73% for customers in the first and second income quintile, respectively. I think there was a question about defining what is ADP. So at a high level, the ADP is a program that provides a discount to customers in the lower income categories. I would invite perhaps somebody from CPS Energy to comment a little bit more on maybe how did ADP come about and what is the primary purpose of ADP. If they want to, they can comment, and I'll pause.
One?
Yeah, I know that the ADP has existed for quite some time, and over the last, I know at least the last few rate cases, every time we have, increased rates, we have increased the commitment to our affordability program. Again, I've said this before, in the utility industry, we haven't called it energy burden necessarily as just a new terminology, but certainly affordability has also always been part of the equation for managing impact when we do have to come forward with a rate request. So, between the work we've done on the affordability discount program, in this case, $4 million additional commitment that the rest of the customers, pick up the tab on. We're increasing the discount to offset the base rate increase, increasing the number of eligible participants in that program. And what this analysis shows is pretty much just the fuel component, which everybody pays. That's a pass through. We don't really earn revenue on that. that is impacting everybody, including our affordability customers. So we'll come back with an exact date on when the affordability discount program started, but it's been a while. And then I would just add the weatherization work that we do for our low-income customers is just another element of an affordability and energy burden, commitment that we make to our low-income customers to try to help them control their usage.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is Rudy mentioned it. We're proposing that we offset that base component, which we spoke about here, and also the second part was expanding the enrollment by 14,000 customers as well. So you're looping in an extra group. So you got 65,000 customers now proposed.
Yeah, Jim has a couple other questions. What does ADP stand for?
Affordability Discount Program.
Okay, and I think I can even answer this one. It's the whole county is actually where the data has come from, and it's not geographic by where your home is. But Jim, if you have any other questions, jump on here and we'll recognize you. Okay. Is that the end of your presentation, Doctor?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay. I wanted to say a couple of things. One, I want to very much appreciate this presentation. It was concise, it was informative, and I'm hopeful that this could get passed on to the council members, because every time I've talked to them, this is front and center on their mind. I want to thank Peter for pushing this forward, and I really, it takes that kind of focus and dedication sometimes to get this done, and I'm very, very comfortable with this. Is there any questions, comments? I see Peter first and then Michael. By the way, if you want to speak, fortunately we don't have Q&A and chat, so I can't get confused. Just put it in the chat and I'll recognize you. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Reed, and Doctor. Thank you, Doctor. Yes, and thank you for responding to the request. I think when I proposed it, and Reed, it was based on a lot of that input that the community really wanted to be able to have data to confirm the impact. Not, we can say what it's going to be, but being able to codify it into a document, I think it's going to be very beneficial going forward with presenting it to those that have that challenge right now, that it is a stopgap, and I think it's our first step, because utilizing this type of study, now that we have a base and the data for those census tracts that have been there, but now that we're going to identify them specifically on the energy burden component, because it's not an exact science. We're talking about averages. As we always say, averages are dangerous, and there's people that are really at 20%. Some of those places are really deep burden. And Rudy, you said this, which really triggered me to see how we can continue to do this work, to be very strategic and provide the data so that the RAC can make not only this RAC, but RACs beyond our term will be able to make decisions based on good data that on the impact. You said, when you saw the map and you're doing this direct outreach, which is great. You guys are, right now, in my eyes, the gold standard of reaching out to community and trying to help people on the ground. And you said, from what I saw, I know where I'm going to go. I'm going to go right here to this census tract. And that's how strategic I would like us to be with the data, is to be able to make a great difference, but then to measure it, because I want to be able to come back in 2 years, 3 years, and say that we turned this energy burden around based on the work that we did starting today with this, because we identified it, and then over the next few months, we start to build a plan that will, working with Bradle, I pray that we'll continue to have a focus group, have a working group at some point. Reed, if it's not our group, some working group will take it up, because it's an important work to continue to carry out the specifics for addressing the energy burden, and tied to, and I think this is the benefit for those that feel like this is a social issue, and it is exclusively, but it's not, because it's not in a silo, because the rate design that we're about to be tasked to work on has the same components. And Dr. Furukai, I shared the Maryland study with the group, and I went and I studied it in depth. And it's a time of use, and it's broken up into what is low moderate income, and that's what they call it. And it's low moderate income. That's the group. And I wanted you to, if you could, just kind of share how that could be implemented here, because you did say it on the October 28th meeting. You said, we could look at doing this with a time of use rate design model. And when we couple that with, we have to do that work, whether it's going to be incline block or if it's going to be time of use or another method, that we factor in that low-income energy burden component. So if you can just share a little bit about that and how you could foresee us doing that with our upcoming work, because it's something I said, Rudy, which was, if we're going to get to work, I'd really like it to be very constructive work and very strategic, so that we're not just throwing around a lot of great ideas and not really drilling down and making great impact with the work that we're doing.
Thank
So
you, Peter.
If you would.
Doctor, would you like to go ahead and comment on that real briefly on that report? A lot of us have already had the chance to read it, so it could be a good review for some that haven't.
Sure. I'm happy to do so. And thank you, Peter, for bringing up the analysis of time of use rates. That, as you know, was done in the state of Maryland for 3 electric utilities, BGE, Pepco, and Delmarva Power and Light. A stakeholder group was created, and they really wanted to make sure that the low income and moderate income groups, or LMI for short, are appropriately represented in that analysis. So we had a 2-track approach. One track was LMI customers, the other track was all other customers. And they were given the opportunity to get on a time of use rate with lower off-peak prices, significantly lower off-peak prices, like as much as, I would say 80% lower than peak period prices. And since most of the hours in the day are off-peak, they were given an opportunity to lower their bills by taking the time of use rate, responding to it, and lowering their peak usage and shifting some of it to the off-peak period. The results were very encouraging. LMI customers availed themselves of that opportunity just as much as the non-LMI customers. Previously, there was a commonly and strongly held belief in the industry that LMI customers cannot respond. They either don't have the insights, the education, the technology, the appliances, or the housing structure that would allow them to benefit from the response. But these 3 pilots in Maryland, with LMI as one track and non-LMI as the other track, showed pretty clearly that that was not correct. And you would think that LMI customers have more to gain by saving $10 on their bill as opposed to non-LMI customers, because each dollar has more value for them in the household budget if they're LMI than if they're not LMI. So that's my sort of short response. I'll add a footnote to that if I might, which is that in the state of Washington, around Seattle, there is a utility with 1 million customers called Puget Sound Energy. They have also wanted to do this analysis. We have assisted them, and their pilot will begin, I think, in a year's time, and it'll have a similarly separate tracks for LMI and non-LMI. That is the new development, and it's very encouraging to see utilities taking a very strong interest in making sure that the lower income segments are not excluded from these opportunities to enhance affordability. If anything, they need it even more than the non-low income segments.
Thank you. Just one last question for CPS, maybe Corey. To pay for the ADP, and it's in the fuel adjustment, or how is it paid for? Like we say that it's cross subsidization, so I want to address that so that we understand how that's being paid for, who's paying for it, and how much.
Yeah, it's in the base, not in fuel, and it's being paid for by other customers. So the commercial customer groups actually will have some of that built into their bills along with residential customers who are not in the affordability program. So that spend of, the additional incremental folks we're going to add plus offsetting, the base burden, that's actually closer. It's like $4.5 million, almost $5 million. But that is collectively spread in each of the bill impacts. vary by group, and I have that somewhere in these binders, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, just so we can see who's paying for it, and, because going forward, that's gonna be the question. The more we subsidize, we wanna know who's paying for what. But that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Michael, please.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for these slides. I like the way they're presented. It's understandable. I guess my only concern is that I think it only shows part of the picture, and that is it's showing the reduction in energy burden on when you include the proposed ADP on somebody who wasn't on ADP before, and now where it goes. What I think people are going to be asking is, what's the change in energy burden for someone who is already on ADP and gets a slight advantage from this changed ADP? This is going from one extreme of I have no ADP to the new one, but we don't know what the change in energy burden is on those people already on the ADP program. Is that a correct assumption?
Well, I'll let experts respond to that. I have an answer, but I'm sure I might be wrong. Go ahead, Dr. Ziqua. Fair question.
Thank you. Actually, Travis or Rohan, my team members, do you have a specific answer for that question, or do we have to do another pass at the numbers to be able to differentiate the impact on customers who already have ADP versus those who don't?
So I can jump in on that point. The calculations that we did incorporate the fact that a lot of these customers will already be on ADP. So for example, I think in the presentation we brought up an 8.6% energy burden. Those were for first income quintile customers who were on the ADP before the fuel cost recovery increase and the base rate increase. So after the composite effect of the fuel cost recovery increase, the base rate increase, and the ADP increase, their energy burden goes from about 8.6% to just under 8.7%, I think about 8.66%. So we do account for that. I think that graph that we showed, I believe was on slide 8 or slide 9, that didn't show that chart didn't show the energy burden with the ADP, but we did do our calculations, and a lot of the numbers we mentioned in the presentation do incorporate the fact that these customers did have ADP beforehand, and we sort of do a comparison of what it was beforehand and after.
I've got
You
a
could see it in
little bit
slide-
more of a basic question, if I could, here, Michael, just to clarify in my mind. We're talking about first and second quartiles, and if I remember, ADP is 125%, is that right? So are you saying that everybody in the first and second quartile are at 125% or below? That seems, I don't know, I don't get that.
We just went in with the assumption that people in the first and second income quintiles are the ones that are going to be getting that ADP benefit.
Right, but did you check to see if the first and second quartiles in our area are under the 125, so they would qualify for that?
You're talking about 125 below the federal poverty limit?
Of the poverty level, yeah, that's where I believe the ADP is capped. Am I wrong?
No, you're correct.
Okay.
We could double check that, but I'm reasonably sure that at minimum in the first income quintile, that is the case, but we could double check and get back to you on that one.
Well, you don't need to get back to me. I'm just trying to make sure that if we're saying we're looking at first and second, and we're saying that the ADP is what has the big impact on this, are all of the people in first, let me be simple, are all the folks in first and second quartile, can they access this program at 125? That's the question.
So Reed, I think we need to double check that. That's the assumption we are making, as Travis indicated.
Yeah.
We can confer with the CPS Energy team and just kind of get a better sense of how many particularly in the second quintile. I'm pretty certain those in the first quintile definitely qualify for it. And of course, another comment I'll make is that not everybody who qualifies automatically gets it, right? They have to take some action in order to get it. And
Right.
feel free to correct me if I'm misstating it. One of the CPS Energy folks can perhaps comment on that.
That's correct, Dr. Furquite. Not everybody who qualifies actually applies for it. So that's why we do so much outreach. And it's a limited, kind of qualification program, right? So we're increasing the numbers because the need in our community is great. But, to fund everybody who, we would have to commit more dollars that the rest of the system picks up to really cover everybody who could possibly apply. So we try to focus in on those that take action, to do that. There's been a lot of conversation about, well, could you increase from 125% to 200%? Sure. For some amount of money, you can go as high as you want to go in, the amount of assistance you're willing to provide. It just, again, it costs money. It's not free. The rest of the customers are having to commit to that. So it's a kind of a community conversation for those of us who are, paying extra to help others. And I'm personally glad to do it. But, I think there are limits to what our community is going to be willing to commit to. So when you start talking about changing the percentage level, you're talking about an additional commitment that, that has to pay for that. Because the 65,000 that we are proposing increasing it to still won't take care of everybody, that could get, could be eligible for funding.
Reed, I have a
Let me
point.
give a follow-up here for Michael, because I interrupted him. Let me just get the reason this is important, because if you're a council person and you're going out to a meeting and you say, if you're in the first and second quartile, you can apply for this plan. First of all, we need to know what the first and second quartile are. And second of all, we need to know if somebody at some point doesn't qualify, we need to be able to let them know they don't qualify. That's all I'm trying to say. Sure, go ahead.
So I have an answer for you. So this was done by quintiles. So quintile, 20%, the lowest 20% of income. I've heard estimates from some of our internal teams here that there's anywhere between 160,000 and 200,000 people in our community that are eligible for the affordability discount program. In other words, that's the quantity of people in our community that have 125% of the federal poverty limit or below. Quintiles, that's 20%. 20% of our entire customer base would be about 160,000. So that first quintile should entirely be eligible for the ADP. That's the quintile that has about an 8.6% energy burden. The next quintile, which we'll have to confirm if they're eligible for ADP or not. Some of them probably are. The majority probably are not. Their energy burden is 3.6. I think that's what was in the presentation.
Correct. It's 3.9.
3.9. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that answers the question. I think that could help if we could kind of clean that up so it gives the guidance to some of the folks that y'all are going to go out talking to communities in the next. So let's clean that up. Okay, Michael, I just want to make sure. Did you have something?
Can I just confirm one thing too? So on slide 2, we have a figure that shows the interval means for each income quintile. And in the first income quintile, the first income quintile max is about 25,000. So if we're assuming a household size of 4, then 100% of the first income quintile does qualify for the ADP program.
Good.
Now, because the folks that are in these quintiles is the median. Is the next slide? I'm sorry. Because it's the interval mean, right? There's a max and a min associated with each one of these quintiles. But if we were to look at the second income quintile, the max is actually 47,000. So that would not qualify. So everybody in the max that's in the second income quintile would not be eligible for the program, but that is the max. And the bars that you're seeing here is actually the mean. So there is a portion of the population, particularly at the lower end, that would be able to qualify for the program. but, we're just presenting this information in terms of the interval means.
Okay, thank you.
Terms of-
All right, Corey's got an answer here for one of Peter's questions. And then if you have any questions out, I've got one coming in from Jim, and we'll bounce it over to him in just a minute. Any others, put it in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, so Peter, you were asking what the cost to other customers are, I believe, right, for the affordability discount program? So I'll give high-level numbers, and I'll break it out by customer group. So the current program is about $6.7 million. With the proposed increase, it's 4.9, so you're looking at about 11.6 for the total program if we get the full recommendation passed. For the small commercial customers, this is all based on average usage. It's about $2.16 per month. This would be with the proposed amount. For large commercial customers, about $50 a month. For extra large commercial customers, about $542 a month. And our super large customers, $2,200 a month. And those customers, they have bills that are close to $500,000. So it's all kind of relative on the size of the bill. So it's a little bit of order of magnitude for you in terms of the contributions the other customer groups are making for that aggregate number.
Okay, any other questions on this? If not, thank you all very much. I appreciate the Brattle Group and their attention to this detail and very timely information. We'll now move into the remainder of our meeting, which will be, I will call on each member. I've got it here on the list in alphabetical order. They'll tell me how they vote, and then we would very much appreciate each one reading their comments so that it gets on the record here, and then we will collect those or have them sent to Ann, and those will be combined for the further distribution. And the first person is John Agather.
Good afternoon. On the first vote, I would like to commence by thanking our chair, Mr. Reed Williams, for leading us through this challenging process. He has been patient, fair, and obviously knows the subject matter very well. I regret that I will vote no for a rate increase. I cannot, in good faith, vote for giving more money to an organization I believe to be in a state of deep distress of management capability and financial oversight. When the Rate Advisory Committee was formed, I was told we would be able to discuss the long-term needs of CPS Energy in relation to any current rate hike that may be considered. Those long-term requirements included future power generation desires, types of generation, alternative rate structures, distribution options, power brokerage agreements, and ratepayer impacts. What we have sat through for months are endless lectures from CPS Energy management with little time to effectively discuss among committee members viable options for going forward as they pertain to a rate increase. When we were formed, no timeline for a decision was mentioned. So we politely sat through all these lectures thinking we would have ample time to discuss the need for a rate hike in a comprehensive way. Then out of nowhere, we were given a deadline that we had to vote for a rate increase. We have had little to no meaningful discussion about this among committee members. Instead, we are being steered toward a vote because of an emergency need for cash by CPS Energy. I strongly opposed the formation of the Rate Advisory Committee because I thought it was a political stunt. The mayor repeatedly mentioned in Board of Trustees meetings that Iraq was needed so that the quote-unquote citizens could have a voice to discuss CP Energy needs and rates. There already exists a Citizens Advisory Council for CPS Energy that could fulfill this role. Yet the mayor insisted a new committee be formed. We have spent many, many months listening to CP Energy management presentations. In spite of that, CPS Energy management has twice ignored any recommendation from the RAC and gone straight to City Council to argue for a rate increase. Paula Gold-Williams asked for a 10+ percentage point increase, and more recently, Rudy Garza asked for a 3.8% increase. Neither of those requests were discussed with the RAC prior to approaching City Council. What we have been given instead are hurried explanations that agencies might downgrade CPS Energy's credit ratings, effectively raising their cost of borrowing. I believe that what we really need to do is correct the management and trustee oversight issues that are clearly plaguing this organization. If we do that, the ratings will take care of themselves. In other words, let's actually fix the problems. What we really need is a new study about how CPS Energy is constituted. It has recently been brought to my attention that when CPS Energy was formed in the early 1940s, the trustee model that was selected had the purpose of keeping politics out of running this citizen-owned utility company. It was supposed to run like a business. When CPS Energy was formed, there were 4 trustees, and the 5th was an ex officio non-voting spot given to the mayor. That was the model that served our community very well for decades. Somewhere that model changed to now allow the mayor to vote along with the other trustees. That is an inherent conflict of interest. You cannot be an owner and a regulator. That is the equivalent of being judge, jury, and executioner. What has resulted is the politicization of our utility company. A perfect example of that is how the most recent trustee was selected and approved by City Council. Before the application process was even closed, the mayor made it well known that his pick for the vacating position on the Board of Trustees was Francine Romero. He was able to vote for her twice, once in the CPSE Board of Trustees meeting and then again at City Council. His influence was huge. He is the only citywide elected official involved in both bodies and holds much ability to influence insiders so that he can get his way, and he did that. We, on the other hand, are just ordinary citizens trying to be good stewards of the trust placed in us to deliberate and recommend a rate strategy going forward. Even if we had been able to discuss that freely with ample time, CPS Energy Management and the Board of Trustees have ignored the Rate Advisory Committee and gone straight to City Council asking for a rate increase. My understanding is that the Rate Advisory Committee is to survive this vote and deliberate anew in the coming year. My question is, why? We were formed to vote on a rate increase. We are doing that, so why do we still need to meet? Even if we do go forward, to what end are we deliberating? We have already been ignored in our principal mission. Why waste our time? Customers of city public service, please hear what I am saying. The fix is in. Your rates will be increased, and they will feed the political needs of the mayor and the mismanagement of CPS Energy. We are in danger of losing the best asset the citizens of San Antonio own and benefit from. If that makes you angry, then demand change. I vote no on vote 1. I vote yes on the recommended creation of the regulatory asset.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, we'll move to Kurt Anastasio, and I believe he's remote.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would join in commending the excellent job you've done in managing this committee's work. Hopefully you can hear me.
We can.
Okay, good. On vote 1, my comments will be short with regard to the recommended base rate increase. I vote yes. I think CBS has taken a reasonable approach, switched to a reasonable approach, I might say, by focusing on short-term priorities like the staffing, the technology needs, and so forth for now, and then leaving the longer-term issues for further study. I think that's the right approach, and I vote yes. And with regard to the creation of the regulatory asset for Winter Storm Uri fuel costs, I vote yes on that. And management has explained, to my satisfaction, that this is the appropriate accounting methodology to preserve the opportunity for cost recovery over time. I'm not as clear on the split between accepted costs and disputed costs and the sort of level of validity of our disputed costs, but leaving that aside, that does not affect my vote in favor of the regulatory asset. That's it for me.
Thank you, Kurt. Seymour Battle?
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to commend you on the job you've done with leading the committee, the CPS, for all your comments and your feedback you've given us as well as just the committee for the service. So I will be voting no on the rate increase, and then my comments are as such. One of my stated goals and outcomes for the RAC process was that it would result in a more informed and educated community with respect to the revenue relationship between the City of San Antonio and our public utility company, CPS. The hope was that the public would become more informed about how historical management and operational decisions have resulted in a need to explore an energy rate increase during a time when many customers continue to face financial hardships and are unable to resolve past due energy bills. Where there has been progress, I do not believe that these discussions have resulted in the level of education for the public that allows the average citizen to have a baseline understanding of the numerous factors that are considered in determining a proposed rate increase and differentiate between the impacts of Winter Storm Uri versus the impacts of historical, ongoing, and future operational considerations. There has been much confusion as to the RAC's charter as it relates to the determination of the current rate increase and the intersection of the role of the pre-existing Citizens Advisory Committee. The confusion remains and calls into question RAC's formation. The RAC was not organized to make a determination on the current rate increase, but was to be focused on the future rate increases proposed by CPS. This decision is the decision to increase energy rates, not the percentage, had been previously determined ahead of the RAC's creation. For this reason, I'm unable to provide my approval for this current rate increase. And then lastly, I want to say I really believe a one-sided solution of increasing rates without also considering a temporary or permanent gross revenue percentage reduction to the city of San Antonio does not represent a comprehensive or sustainable solution and could result in recurring rate increases that would overly burden distressed communities. That is my decision, so my vote is no on the rate increase. My vote on the second vote is yes, and I just believe the creation of the regulatory asset is the appropriate fiscally responsible method for CPS Energy to address the fuel costs that are directly associated with the winter storm. Thank you.
Thank you, Seymour. Dee Bomaris.
Thank you, Reed. I understand CPS Energy's financial position in their rate increase request. It's been 7 years since the utility has raised rates. However, in those years, as the utility has publicly stated a need for an increase, CPS Energy has had ample time to engage in a rate design process. CPS Energy, in doing its due diligence, should have included RAC in the beginning of that process, even as they move forward with this rate hike. The same should be said for generation planning. I want to remind everyone that our committee purpose was, and has always been, members of the RAC will devote the necessary time and energy to learn about the utility business and the rate design function in order to understand and provide thoughtful input and perspectives to CPS Energy management and Board of Trustees on rate structure, rate design, proposed rate increases, and generation planning issues. This is what ratepayers needed to see us do. Instead, they're being hit with a rate increase despite that thousands of them were left in freezing temperatures during Winter Storm Uri. They're seeing media coverage of former CEO Paula Gold-Williams and former COO Fred Bonwell spending thousands of dollars on things like Beats headphones, expensive steak dinners, and limo rides. I appreciate CPS Energy taking the time to examine energy burden and adding customers to the ADP, and I hope they'll continue to be committed to strengthening it for the most vulnerable. And finally, please keep engaging customers inside and outside of the city as you all move forward with the rate hike. For the first vote on the rate hike, I vote no. And on the second item, informing the regulatory asset, I vote yes.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Okay, we've got Jim Berg, and he's remote. Jim, could you please turn on your video?
It is turned on.
Okay, I'm having trouble. There you go, Jim. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, yes. I appreciate and I agree in so many ways with what John, Agatha, and Kurt have said before me, as well as Seymour and Dee Dee. But however, I come to a different conclusion, and that is that I vote yes on both proposals. If I have one conclusion, it is that oil and water are politics and business, and the mayor should forthwith withdraw his vote on the Board of Trustees and should be advisory only. And the city council should listen to CPS when it needs money and approve it. I think this rather minor, let's just say, increase right now, regardless of how it's distributed amongst those in need and those who are not, is muted, but is necessary. And that in the long run, we answer not to the politicians of this city, but rather to those who really own the utility, which are not only the citizens, but even more so the bondholders. And they have a say in those rate analysis organizations as well. And they have something very important to say if we want to play politics with business, which is oil and water. And that's all I have. My
Okay,
vote's-
could you just review there, Jim, your votes on both?
Yes on the increase and yes on the regulatory
Okay.
asset.
Thank you, Jim. I just wanted to get that right. Andy Castillo is, let's see, he is, let me see. Andy, are you in? I see you.
Can you hear me?
We got you now.
You guys
Go ahead,
hear me?
Andy. We can hear you.
Okay. See, I understand the fiscal requirements that come with running a business, that demand of materials, talent, and inflation warrant attention to business needs to help offset costs. I also understand that past 2 years have been unusual with COVID and with weather. It has made life even more difficult for a lot of people who were just getting by day to day before the pandemic. I worry that so many people will slip through the cracks and fall further behind fiscal requirements with this increase. There are so many customers that make it work with what they have. I advise the CPS continue to strategize a long-term solution with the RAC, CAC, their financial team for any future rate increase. What is needed now is for CPS and community leaders to help continue their continue to educate and explain to the customers why a rate increase is necessary, how it will benefit reliability, and how CPS will help those that are struggling to cope with this proposed increase. The burden of this financial pressure should not be placed on the backs of customers, especially those at the highest risk of losing necessary services in these unprecedented times. I respectfully vote no on this presented motion to increase customer rates. And then as far as the second, I vote yes.
Okay, thank you, Andy. The next person is Norm Dugas. Is Norm remote?
No, Reed was not going to be able to be here. He asked me to read his vote for him. He sent in his forms. So on the rate increase, he votes yes, and his comments are, for the record, considering the revenue needs of CPS Energy, I think the proposed rate increase should be larger. That's his only comment. And then on the second vote, he also votes yes with no comments.
Okay, thank you, Ann. The next one is Wayne Edgington. Eddington? Go ahead. Is Wayne on there? I'm looking. I don't see Wayne.
He's down at the bottom, right?
Way down. Okay, Wayne, are you on, and can you please start? Wayne?
He's in Nevada. We may need to go back to him.
Yeah, he said he was going to have connection problems.
Yeah.
He's still at a family event. We'll hope.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We got you, Wayne. Go, man.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem.
My vote is, I'm gonna be real quick. My vote is yes on both items. I agree with Jim Kirk in the last statement that was read. The only problems I have is with the procedure of how this thing went about. I found out it's gonna be a 10% rate from the news. I found out it's gonna be a 4 something from the news. And I said, well, gee, we're the committee, but I didn't even know that went out from the committee or how it got there. So I have a problem with the procedure. And the last thing I'd like to say is, our job was to look at a rate for what's best for the city. I didn't know we were asked to evaluate the board or the leadership or all these other things that's going on, and the mayor and all these other stuff. I thought our job was to look at the rates to keep CPS solvent and keep power on in the city. So that's what I tried to do and tried to stick with the task at hand. Like I said, I wish we could have had the procedures a little bit different from what happened, but I'm voting yes on both items. I agree with Kirk and Jim in the last statement read.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Okay, Anthony Edwards. Do you have a mic?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me first start out by saying that I've had a personal relationship with CPS Energy for more than 40 years. I remember the days we used to call it city public service. Public service. As a matter of fact, as we communicated with each other and people in the community, we said public service. That was who we were. And so I want to say that as a laying the foundation. Also want to say to you that my comments are premised on the fact that having been a part of CPS Energy for more than 40 years, I'm aware that for the last 20, 30 years that the 3.85% increase is in relative alignment with past rate increases, despite the fact that they only occur every 7, 8 years. But I think what's important is to look at the long-term history. We've gone through a lot of things over the last 40 years with regard to this industry. So what I'd like to do is to read to you very briefly what I've responded. Do you approve the 3.85% increase? And my answer to that is yes, but I would like to include the following comments. In order to gain my support for the 3.85 increase, I would like to recommend that CPS Energy communicate to its customers the plan to request for a 5% increase to its base rate in 2024 so that customers are aware that a planned increase is imminent in 2 years. Further, I would also recommend that CPS Energy communicate that it is anticipated a 5% increase would be requested again around 2026. Now that is based on a conversation that we had here several weeks ago where CPS indicated in a presentation that they would in fact probably be coming back and asking for a rate increase. So I think it's really important to convey to the to our customers. And I think also too is really, from my perspective, it's really important to allow our customers to have a sense for our history of who we are, who we have been. And I think that when we give public information and give a long-term history of being a public service, I think that has a way of making these kind of tough issues a little bit more palatable for our customers. And as to question number 2, I vote yes.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Okay, Jack Hebden, and I believe Jack is also remote, please.
Yeah, I am, Reed. I submitted my vote before the meeting, and it's quite a long response. I'm not going to sit here and read it. But for issue number 1, the rate increase, I voted no. I'm primarily concerned about, the situation with management right now. And, we've ended up with this employee issue, a shortage of employees, the software issue. I look at all those as those are failures of management to address those. And maybe the lack of rate increase over the last 7 years has led to that. I don't know, but I just think we're rushing into this. We need to really, the Board of Trustees needs to go find a suitable CEO to come in and turn this ship around and put together a longer term plan that they can really go out and explain. I agree with what Wayne was saying. I mean, we need to be able to go out and tell people what we're going to be doing over the next 10 years. It's the way I run my business. And so for a lot of reasons, I voted no, and I think we need to get our ship in order and then go out and really ask for a rate increase. As for vote number 2, I don't see any other way to solve that issue. If today we were to go out and charge everybody, it'd be about $400 a customer. We can't go do that. So creating the regulatory asset, I vote yes. So I voted no for number 1 and yes for number 2.
I'd remind you, Jack, we have plenty of time if you'd like to read your comment, because I think if you don't mind, we have the time. So don't cut yourself short because of lack of time.
Okay.
We're sitting here with an hour and 49 more minutes, just to be exact.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I'll just read verbatim what I wrote. So I've not been convinced that we need this level of rate increase at this time. Perhaps a small increase now to support the employee needs and the software upgrade. I have other concerns which I tried to outline below. Number 1, I do not have a lot of confidence in the management team that exists today at CPS. We've seen most of the senior management leave in the past 10 months. We're also continuing to see other key associates leave. Why has CPS allowed the workforce to fall to such a dangerously low point? This didn't happen overnight. Has the lack of rate increases in the past led to tightening of compensation, which has now put CPS in a position to lose associates because they could be paid more at other firms? Was spending $100 million on a new building the best direction when they had $73 million of issues they now need to address? Second, why did we not ask for an increase before now? We spent the last 7 years just trying to get by. There are several reasons that we need a rate increase now. Most of those are issues which have been building over the past 7 years. This points to a lack of leadership from management, Board of Trustees, and the mayor of San Antonio. Number 3, at last week's meeting, one of the members mentioned that CPS asked for a 10% increase and then went and lowered the request. If I understood Rudy, he said a request was not made. Oligo Williams did go before council and tell them there would be a request for a 10% rate hike before she left. I understand the need for software upgrades and know they are expensive, not only for the software and hardware, but the time and stress they put on the organization. The cost for the upgrade is only part of the cost. It will also create a lot of lost time for the organization until everyone is trained and comfortable using the new system. To let the software get so old that no one maintains it more is again an issue that falls back on management and the Board of Trustees. My experience with enterprise system is the provider will begin to notify you several years out that they will no longer support the software or version. I asked for a cash flow in September. It was not submitted to the RAC until Thanksgiving. As a former CFO of a large multi-billion-dollar company, I had a cash flow on my desk every morning. At last week's meeting, I asked if we could go through the cash flow in detail, and that was just kicked back to me to ask any questions I had. It was not that I had a lot of questions, but we were handed a document without any written explanation or assumptions. I took the 3 rate increases out, but left all other lines on, and although the net cash was at a level that I would not be comfortable with, it was still positive for at least the next 3 years. For sure, enough time to try to put the house in order. I don't understand why the current ratepayer should be covering the cost of growth in the system due to growth in the city from new businesses or the new residential growth. I do a lot of real estate development, both residential and commercial, in other cities around Texas, in addition to San Antonio, and pay high impact fees and fees to bring services to our projects. That should be borne by the developer. I have never understood the STEP program. Why pay folks who probably can afford solar to get off the grid? If you're going to continue STEP, wouldn't the dollars be better spent to help customers who cannot afford to make their homes more efficient? In summary, CPS needs to increase the rates to address problems that are the cause of poor management and oversight, Board of Trustees, over the past 7 years. It's important the Board of Trustees consists of individuals who have the qualifications to advise CPS management into the future. The board needs to start an immediate search to find a new CEO who can come in, set plans in place to ensure that CPS is on the right footing going forward. I can think of several people already in San Antonio who have the business qualifications to hold that position. Rebuild confidence with the ratepayers and at the same time let the RAC finish addressing the rate structure. Once a comprehensive 10-year plan is developed along with planned rate increases, then CPS will go out to the community and sell that 10-year program. This needs to happen quickly because we don't want to lose CPS. The alternatives of other power providers will result in higher energy costs and with lost revenue to the city, higher taxes as well. I have talked to several constituents in my district, and all I hear is concerns that CPS is falling apart. There's a credibility issue currently, and support in District 10 is very low for a rate increase at this time. And that was what I submitted.
Thank you very much, Jack. I
Thank
appreciate you reading that because I found, unfortunately, people are not reading as much as they used to, and they need to hear everybody's voice. The next person is Michael. Nick?
Okay, on the first vote for the rate increase, I vote yes. I'll read my comments. I support the proposed 3.85% base rate increase proposed by CPS Energy. As this gas and electric company is owned by the city of San Antonio, thus owned by the citizen ratepayers, it is prudent to make sure it is properly financed, operated, and maintained. While there are many long-range needs not included in this rate increase, it is my understanding that the 3.85% rate increase will fund several immediate needs, including staffing stabilization with over 400 employee positions open right now. CPS has lost too many valuable employees to higher paying utilities, and they're expecting retirement of 100 plus employees a year. Two, this is for the maintenance of generation stations, including the needed weatherization efforts. Three is to start the technology replacement program for IT systems, including a new enterprise resource planning system for business operations and SCADA systems for electric distribution control. Four, this is for growth of the city, which includes upgrades, expansions of electrical transmission and distribution systems to keep up with the obligation to deliver gas and electricity to all in the service territory. It is important to remember that CPS Energy has not requested a rate increase for over 8 years. Clearly, inflation costs to operate and maintain these energy systems have increased more than 3.8% in 8 years. Also, material costs have increased due to pandemic supply chain issues. In order to steady the long-term finances and operational maintenance of CPS Energy, there are larger issues which still need to be resolved, including planning for future generation energy sources. These decisions will drive future costs. Rate design, restructuring of how CPS calculates and presents their customer bill, examination of rate burden on how low-income residential customers, and four, creation of a plan to cover bad customer debt related to the COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, addressing these larger issues will take time. CPS Energy must take care of immediate needs ASAP. Should CPS Energy not receive the needed revenues to address the immediate needs, this utility will likely be impacted by a less reliable energy infrastructure, the inability to keep up with future growth, and by increased cost of debt financing. If this utility is not properly managed, it is likely the assigned credit rating will fall. If the New York financial industry lowers the credit ratings, interest on future debt will drastically increase, potentially increasing financing costs. I recognize that the burden of this rate increase may be greater on those residential customers with lower household incomes. Such disparities place an urgent need on CPS Energy and this CPS RAC committee to make energy rate design a high priority. Addressing energy burden must be part of any rate restructuring, rate design. Finally, I make a comment, should this rate increase not pass council, one funding alternative might be for city council to reduce the transfer of funds, CPS Energy to City of San Antonio, from 14% to 10% so that CPS can utilize the difference. On the second vote, recommendation for the regulatory asset, my vote again is yes. And I think we're all pretty much in consensus on this one, but I'm going to just summarize then my comments here instead of reading them all, and obviously I'll turn this in. But basically this regulatory asset's going to allow for the borrowing of money to pay for the $418 million we've already paid and spread that cost out over 25 years. The alternatives would be to pass that burden on to the citizens and business customers right now in the fuel adjustment fee, and that's just not acceptable. The other alternative would be recognizing this as an operating expense, and in that case, the utility would be short on funds to pay for their debt, the debt they already have, and for the transfer to the city. These other options just aren't reasonable. So because of those reasons, I support the creation of a regulatory asset. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. The next person is Anita Ledbetter, and I believe she is remote. Anita, you've got the mic.
Yes. Hold on. Oh my goodness, Jacob. It won't, it froze. Can you hear me?
We can now, Anita. Please go ahead.
Okay, so sorry about that. Having computer problems.
We're not hearing you now if you're speaking. Hello? Anita? I'll try to call her. Anita?
Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. It kicked me out. I had to
All
rejoin.
right, we got you now. Please go.
Thank you. So I wanted to, first item regarding the rate increase of 3.85%. I want to say, this rate increase weighs heavily on me, as I'm sure it does many of us, because I understand very well that any rate increase is going to have a huge impact on the people and families in our community, many of whom are already struggling. But we need to make sure that our community is stabilized and prepared for extreme weather so that we can prevent whole system failure. It is a hard choice to have to choose between a rate increase and our system breaking apart. Extreme weather, energy burden and poverty, inequity in infrastructure, and the variable rising cost of fuel make us extremely vulnerable in the future. The people of San Antonio have the right to equal access to power and programs. But because we are an old city and because of the historic past inequity in our community, our infrastructure is not balanced. And part of this increase, my understanding is that will help us fix parts of the grid that are not prepared. We must prevent our system from failing again. Every day that passes, it will continue to be more expensive, and lack of action will disproportionately hurt the most vulnerable of us. This is why that I urge that as we move forward into the future of this committee, that we strive to stay on mission and focus. We need to have a timeline and roadmap for when future decisions need to be made that are not a part of this current rate increase request. The pandemic debt, future generation, rate design, these are all challenges that we will need to work together on. The people of San Antonio are depending on us to move forward strategically. And as we move forward, we're going to have to work together. I feel, those are my feelings. I will say this. I believe that, our charge was not to vote on this current rate increase, and we were just asked in the last few weeks to do so. I don't really feel prepared to do that because we weren't proceeding with that intent. And it's just recently happened. Even though I support it, I do not believe that it is our role at this time to vote on that, but instead to do as asked, which is to advise the Board of Trustees and the people of San Antonio our input on it. On the second matter, recommending the creation of the regulatory asset, I want to say that I am very sad and very angry that we have this debt, as we all are. I see no other option than to spread it out over 25 years. The reality is that we were not prepared for the winter storm, and neither was anyone else. But there is something morally and fundamentally wrong that during this most vulnerable time, a time of great tragedy, that our community was taken advantage of by outside predatory suppliers and regulators. We have to continue to make sure as a utility, as a city, and as a community that this does not happen to us again in the future. So, and those are my comments. I thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Your vote in both cases was a no vote, right? It's a vote. It was
No, sir.
a not to vote. It's not no. It's not to vote, right? You are refusing to vote. That's correct.
I'm abstaining from voting, yes, but I think you can see how I feel about it based on my comments.
I got your comments, but I just want to make sure we will put it down as an abstention. Thank you. Dana McGinnis.
Thank you, Reed, and thank you for all your work, and actually the whole committee. Quickly on the regulatory asset, that's a yes. On the other part, I do have some comments. First of all, I was trying to nuance my vote here because I would like to vote for half of what they asked for. But in talking to Reed, it's either yes or no on that. So basically, it's going to have to be a no, but I have some comments. It's because I don't think CPS has really explained well enough about in detail why they need this rate increase of 3.85%. And what I'd say that they need to better address the specific reason for the request. So I have some further comments and points, and here they are. So I would approve some money for personnel because I think it's really needed. In fact, I think all employees should actually get a 20% salary increase. So I think the morale is low, and this might help. I think it should. In my opinion, they've been underpaid for too long. Employees are now leaving. Poor pay is no way to save money in a business, as employees are the key to any business. I personally know of 2 CPS fairly senior engineers who have resigned in the last year who are now employed in very good positions at other companies at far higher pay. As a further example, point 2, Paul Barham and Frank Almaraz, 2 senior operational engineers that actually are here present today, with long experience at CPS, have recently tendered their resignations. CPS can ill afford this type of loss. These 2 should be offered twice their current salary if they had stayed for at least 2 years. So money, at part of my recommendation of 1.925%, which according to the rules, I have to vote no, but money should be spent on computer systems and software upgrades as requested as part of the increase. Additional personnel should also be added and paid well if needed. The state-of-the-art systems are necessary to carry CPS into the future, but no money should go towards point 4, subsidizing growth. It's the current ratepayers who pay this subsidy. Why should we subsidize growth on the edge of town? The growth should pay for itself and will do so if priced properly. And as a further comment on that, not written, that if people have left already, you have money in their salaries. You don't need extra money to hire somebody as a replacement. And anybody who's hired for growth should be compensated out of the fees and charges that you get from the new customers. That's just the way proper accounting should work. STEP program, point 5, should be stopped immediately. It is not CPS who pays for STEP, it's the ratepayers. This ill-conceived program has cost ratepayers about $80 million a year for the last 10 years. That is already too much. It is improper for one ratepayer to pay for advantages his next-door neighbor receives. Few ratepayers understand what STEP does or who pays for it. The answer is it's we who pay for it, not CPS, although CPS always takes credit for the funding. But the question is, why do this? There is no credible evidence that I've seen that shows that STEP has accomplished what its stated goals are with STEP. If it were stopped today, ratepayers would see bills reduced tomorrow by 4%. Someone can check the math on that, but I think that's pretty close. This would help, and it's only good management and stewardship of customers' money. Now, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think the board should be replaced. They're also responsible for the current problems, and after all, they and the previous CEO are responsible for spending $1 billion that CPS did not have during the winter freeze. The stated reason for this, and we suppose that it was the board as well, was it necessary to keep the lights on? And I seem to remember that that didn't work very well. So at the very least, the board should be expanded to 9, with additional members coming from experienced business people and community leaders. The mayor, if allowed to be on the board, should not have a vote. A vote from the mayor is too political. As it is, the city already owns and regulates CPS, so where is the real oversight? It's a formula for poor management and bad policy for which there is now ample evidence. The RAC would be happy, I think, to put forward suggestions for the board replacements or additions, and here are some of mine. Jim Berg, Kurt Anastasio, Dr. Femi Osadeli, John Agather, and Brenda Pacheco, whom I consider the heart and the soul of the ordinary ratepayers in San Antonio. With a 1.25% rate increase, the city of San Antonio will also receive an extra $1 million a year from ratepayers. CPS should ask the city if they could use that $1 million to find a permanent CEO and pay him well with CEO with experience. I would strongly suggest that CPS hire our own RAC chairman, Reed Williams, who has both knowledge and experience to do the job. And he's right here in town. We should actually beg. I have complete faith in Reed. If these recommendations are followed or something close to them, CPS can emerge in a much improved financial condition over time. It may take more rate increases as the needed replacement for older plants occur, but with a cleverer team, they may not be needed. That means rate increases. If these positive steps are not taken soon, CPS will flounder and rates will go up because of it without any improvement. I believe RAC can suggest a path forward in the coming weeks, a path that should satisfy most parties, even within the RAC, and keep the lights on at the lowest cost. But who will listen? All this will take leadership with courage that is not now present. With leadership and courage, all other virtues can follow. So let's select a leader with those qualities and give him or her the freedom to act. Thank you. That's a no on the rate increase, even though I'd like to see half of it, and a yes on the regulatory asset.
Okay, thanks, Dana. Anne Marie, please.
Thank you, Reed. And I also want to thank you and my colleagues for all the work that you've done and for your guidance and for the diligence that everyone has shown. It's been an honor to represent District 9 and serve on RAC along with everyone else. In these months, we've all had a crash course in many aspects of the utility industry generally and of CPS specifically. Our chair and the Board of Trustees have been dedicated to our education in this area. Our understanding is critical in order to serve the citizens of San Antonio fully. Each of us made a commitment to be able to dialogue effectively with our fellow citizens on this issue, and my fellow committee members will continue to work very hard. RAC was created to work on these elements looking toward the future. However, it became clear we had things to contribute to the current proposal. After some initial bumps, the responsiveness of CPS to the committee's input and challenges it made to them to view things from new perspectives resulted in a reduction of the proposed base rate increase from 10% to 3.85%, with additional changes to allocations, timelines, assistance programs, and other areas. Everything was scrubbed in an effort to arrive at solutions. I acknowledge many folks will not be satisfied. The taste of Uri is still bitter for all of us. However, it is important to remember this increase is not solely the result of Winter Storm Uri or the pandemic, and that either alone would be difficult. The can has been kicked down the road on any rate increase for about 9 years. We can find many complaints regarding management of money, but it's all water under the bridge. We must deal with the reality of where we are now. Honest examination, transparency, and thoughtful dialogue are what we need now, not politics or blaming, along with our hard work. The rate increase we are being asked to vote on funds a capital plan, emergency preparedness, rate design, affordability programs, and establishing a regulatory asset, to name a few components. If a regulatory asset is established, COSA has already stipulated it would not assess its annual 14% payment on those funds. This is a huge savings and another good example of the creative thinking being engaged in these discussions. The city manager's CFO has thoroughly reviewed the request of CPS and the impact of the 3.85 base rate increase on the budget. This has resulted in a recommendation from the city staff in support of this increase. If the increase is approved by City Council, the average residential customer will see an increase in their bill of about $5 per month. I acknowledge there are many more of our neighbors in need of help than are currently being addressed. However, we have to start somewhere to make changes. I am encouraged by the work that we have accomplished by everyone involved, and I'm confident that we will continue to move forward and sort through these challenges. In the end, we have an opportunity here to build a truly innovative and sustainable framework for the future of San Antonio and its power grid. With this reality and the potential in mind, I vote in favor of the proposed rate increase as well as in favor of the regulatory asset. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Peter?
Peter Onofre, District 4. After much deliberation over the last few months, today I am in support of the 3.85% CPS base rate increase. I vote yes. My decision is based on the information provided to the RAC and the detail in which it was explained over the course of the past few months by CPS leadership team and city staff. I believe that this rate increase will provide short-term fiscal integrity to CPS and maintains its reliability. I also acknowledge the thoughtful approach to scale back the original request amount and address the short-term requirements in the revised request. This approach will allow the RAC appropriate time to address rate design, generation planning, and emergency burden impact in preparation for the next series of rate requests. I support the ADP funding increase reflected in the Brattle presentation analysis that offsets the rate increase impact on low-income customers. I strongly advise the board to support and endorse the RAC's current effort to utilize Brattle as a consultant in evaluating the scope of a study and simulation pilot program that will produce insight into the impact future rate increase changes, generation planning, and rate increases will have on our low-income energy burden customers. The study will establish the framework by which the RAC can make fiscally sound, data-driven recommendations on rate design, generation planning, STEP, and energy cost burden to the board, beginning with the next rate increase and beyond. I'd like to thank Reed Williams for his leadership and my fellow RAC members for the diligent efforts to leave no stone unturned in pursuit of relevant information and answers to critical questions in fulfilling our charge to advise CPS board on this rate increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Oh, I'm sorry, and on to the
That's
second, that's the first.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I vote yes for the regulatory asset. I support this creation for the Storm Uri fuel cost. This is a necessary financial tool that helps maintain CPS credit rating and financial integrity. I also support the decision made by the city to forego the CPS city payment on the recovery of these funds over the duration of the term.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, Femi?
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Again, to cut things short, I'm going to focus my comments. I'm going to paraphrase some of what I have written because I've not written it out in full, but I will be saying nothing different from what I will be writing down what will not be different from what I'm going to say now. I'm voting yes on both counts, that's both for the 3.85 rate increase as well as the creation of the regulatory asset. I'd like to thank all the RAC members for all the work they've done up till now, and of course there's a lot more to be done in the months to come, so I'm looking forward to continuing to work with all of you. I'm focusing here at the 50,000 foot level, not on the details regarding the rate increase. The details, I think, have been adequately addressed between CPS Energy and the Supervisor of Public Utilities Office, that is Ben Kozel's office, with ample inputs from the RAC members, specifically towards decluttering the rate request to focus on CPS Energy's immediate needs. The simple premise for my vote is inflation. Since the last rate increase in 2014, the average US inflation based on the US Bureau of Labor Statistics data has grown to more than 14%. In other words, a service that costs $100 in 2014 now costs more than $114. Another way to put this is to say that $100 in 2014 is now worth less than $88. CPS Energy is asking for a rate increase of 3.85%. This rate increase does not even cover inflation. Even with operational efficiencies attained by CPS Energy over the last 7 years, these do not make up for the huge gap between the requested rate increase and the historical inflation in our economy. And for this reason, I vote yes. Again, restating that I vote yes on the requested rate increase. On the regulatory assets, my premise is, for my yes vote, is on CPS Energy's financial structure. The budget by CPS's budget is funded through cash and debt. Cash comes from revenues, which customers pay through our bills, and this also comes in terms of allocations from the reserves held in the renewal and replacement accounts. The debt comes from external lenders, who CPS Energy would pay over time from its revenues, again from customer bill payments. So what the regulatory asset does is to allow CPS Energy to borrow money to cover the already paid reasonable validated winter storm Uri fuel cost and repay that debt over 25 years. In other words, we do not have to take the $418 million hit all at once. And for this reason, I vote yes on establishing the regulatory assets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Femi. Brenta? Not yet. Button, there you go. Did the light turn green?
It turned on. Thank you, Reed.
Got it.
First, I'd like to begin by thanking all of you for being as patient as you have been with me. I had many questions because I just simply didn't understand, or I was overwhelmed with one or the other. I'd especially like to thank Dr. Femi and Dana and Dee Dee for taking my calls at 9 o'clock at night when I just had to ask a question. I had to have an answer. That's kind of my personality, okay? So, and they would take my call and answer my questions. So up until even Sunday night, Councilwoman Villagran and I were having much discussion around what we were going to do, how we were going to vote, because I do represent District 3. I represent her. And so initially, she said, you know, Brenda, I just think that perhaps maybe we can go back to the drawing board and see if we can't get that percentage lower just a little bit, because she's been aware of the energy burden of many of the people, not just in District 3, but of the city for a long, long time, long before we started talking about it, okay? So she's aware of that because she knows her constituents. So she was just not sure, and we talked about it. She asked me how I felt. So yesterday, there was a B session for City Council, and based on the comments that were made by both CPS, Rudy, and Reed, she contacted me immediately after that session and said, you know, I think I am not comfortable, of course, but I think I'm going to be okay for now with approving or voting, allowing you to vote for the 3.85%. So based on that, I'm going to say yes to that. Also yes on the regulatory asset. But she also said that she has faith that this committee is going to go forward next year and make some recommendations and strong recommendations on what is going to happen after that. The generation planning, and she has a lot of faith in this group. I'm going to say organization, in this group. And so she's feeling pretty positive about it. She did mention that it was made very clear that the staffing issue is one that she was concerned about. And of course, we all agree that should we have another storm, we want to trust that there's going to be adequate staff that can handle the issues and also answer calls and questions and answer them correctly. You know, get the same answer if you call more than once. So she said that she knew that was important also, that there was a need, clearly a need for more staffing. She said that also she believed that there are some technology issues and that because she was, guaranteed that the 3.85% is going to also take care of that. She said she was okay. So what I would like to share, however, and this is personal, this is not Councilwoman Villagran, is that there was nobody in this group who was more frustrated than I was about hearing that the percentages had changed, over the last few months prior to us knowing about it, okay? Because I would hear it on the news. And I think, well, why are we meeting if they're gonna make decisions, and when I said they, I wasn't sure who was making that decision, but they're gonna make decisions and then they're not even going to tell us prior to that. I have not spoken to any CPS person about this. I've spoken to just others. And I just want to say that I don't think that it was CPS who was choosing to bypass, for lack of a better word, bypass us and go straight to the city staff or city council. I don't think that was CPS. So I just want to be sure that in my opinion, it was not CPS who was doing that, all right? Because going forward, I'd like to think, if that's going to happen again, that CPS sent a memo to us and say, city staff has asked us to meet with them, and they want us to help them make some decisions. And just so you know, we might be making some decisions prior to having shared it with you and it being on the nightly news. And I would appreciate that because it was extremely frustrating. I just want to once again thank all of you, and of course Reed, because Reed was very, very patient with me also, and Ann for answering all my questions and my emails. But I feel good about this, and I think that the councilwoman finding today, or last night, finding does also. So yes and yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Okay, next we've got Al, and okay, there you are. You're supposed to be sitting, okay, all right. Y'all mix it around. I can't, thank you, Al. Go ahead, please.
On the regulatory asset, I vote yes. On the rate increase, I had some concerns. Employee retention is among them, a clear growth plan in generation, limit or higher restrictions on subsidies and rebates, as we do like for the solar programs, and really less political involvement and less following the trend, and more sustainable choices. I believe the management is there that can do this, but because we are owned by the city and the mayor is there and plays a strong part, as we've all voiced, sometimes we have to follow what they want. Those are the elected representatives of our owners. But the primary driver for my decision is to keep our taxes low. So I vote yes on the base rate increase.
Thank you, Al. Did you have anything else? I didn't want to interrupt. Okay, all right, drop it. All right. Okay, Mike, are you on, Mike? Can you know your remote somewhere?
Yeah, I'm on. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, great. Thanks, Reed.
Sure.
And thanks to the RAC members for your work and diligence. It's an honor to serve the city with you. As far as the vote or the rate increase, I'm inclined to vote no. However, we have a credit rating and we have inflation staring at us in the face. Therefore, I'm inclined to vote yes, knowing full well that the last increase was about 7 years ago. Yet, inflation has gone up considerably since then, according to the indexes out there. So I'm still wrestling with this one. I mirror most of what Dana McGinnis' comments were regarding the growth, salary increases, and STEP. And as for CPS, though, I would like to go on the record saying that I've received top-notch customer service from CPS employees in my real estate investment dealings, and I'm very glad for this wonderful, very grateful for this wonderful gift the city has. And like Anita said about the charter, the rate advisory, when this rate advisory committee started, the charter was to provide input on various aspects of utility rate design, the rate structure, and generation planning. I'm not sure how voting for this rate increase was part of our charter. Now, I looked at the website also as far as what we're chartered or what we're charged to do. Also is to receive information on rate design trends and learn about the cost structures, ask relevant questions and raise any potential concerns, and review power generation assets and function an advisory role. But in my core belief here is just that perhaps maybe voting for this rate increase is not within our charter. So therefore, I'm abstaining from this vote. As far as the regulatory asset, that is a yes. I believe the structure of the terms, accounting, the cost recovery methods appear to be fiscally responsible. So that is a yes. And that is all I have, Reed and committee.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. I just got word that, was it Anthony you said wanted? Yeah, okay, go ahead, Anthony. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. I
You
just
wanted
wanted
to
to
make an additional comment.
Yeah, just make an additional comment real quick. I didn't spell this out, but in conclusion, I will withdraw my affirmative support of the rate increase if CPS does not communicate to its customers a clear vision of what it is reasonably expected over the next 4 years. So my point is, as I said earlier, that I do support the 3.85%, but I think in terms of communications, we owe it to our customers to have them become aware of what our short and long-term vision is as it relates to rate increases. So I wanted to make sure of that part. The other thing I want to say too, many of you responded to the questionnaires, and they were part of the emails, and I did receive one yesterday. And it indicated that 2 people had resigned recently. Now, my sense take for CPS Energy is that CPS has a defined benefit plan, which it says that you have to be at least 55 years old and 26 years of service, and you can retire, not resign. I am very concerned that when we language things like this that become part of publicness, it gives the wrong inference. So one of these folks that is retiring was made public not very long ago, and is retiring, not resigning. And I just want to make that very, very clear in my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I believe Rudy wants to make a comment real quick. And go ahead.
Mr. Edwards, I just want to be clear that when you look at the rate plan we have proposed to the city that we've talked to city staff about, it has placeholders in there for percentages for the next couple of discussions. What we've committed to is coming in more frequently, talking about our financial condition, so that it's not a surprise, right? I think a lot of people feel surprised, and so the placeholders are for 5.5% over the next every other year for the next couple of terms. But that's just a placeholder. One of the councilmen keeps trying to tie me down. Oh, so you're suggesting a 14% over the next, there's really a 14%. It isn't. The placeholder, it could be less, right? All kinds of economic conditions drive what the need might be at that time. What we're committed to is coming in to city council and having the conversation. And so those 5% are placeholders. That's not a definite number. That is a placeholder in our financial plan that will be adjusted as financial conditions kind of require of us. So I just want to make sure you recognize we have been very clear that there are placeholders for the next 2 conversations with the city.
Okay. Okay, it's, we're down to me. Let me make a couple of statements. First of all, look, this has been a really, really frustrating process. And anybody that's on this committee that isn't frustrated at this point, they're dead, because you're not feeling. Yeah, I didn't really think this ought to be a committee that voted, even though the bylaws spent way too much time and pages on voting. But as I got further along in the process, I couldn't get people to tell me where they were. And we've got to be telling people where we are. And voting focuses you on where you are. And it brings out your thoughts. And in the end, that's what we want. This is not we win or lose. This is taking a position. It's very uncomfortable to take positions. In fact, it's very unpopular to take positions. But I'm convinced every person on this committee can take a position and justify it. And therefore, I really appreciate it. All right? Thank you. Okay? And I can only hope, these are well-written comments. And I only hope that the trustees and the city councilmen, people, men and women, will read them. The reason that I'm asking you to read them today is because people don't read today. They look at whatever these things are called, YouTube or something like that. I don't know. And the point is that we've got to get it out. And I want to apologize for the very clumsy process we've had and the arduous process. We start in, we do our education, we split into our 3 groups, and then we're hit with a rate increase. Some would say we shouldn't even have to have dealt with it. But I want to thank you for dealing with it, because again, we're spending a lot more time on it than probably anybody else besides the staff at CPS and in Ben Garzel's group. And that's admirable. Thank you. That's all I can say. All right, and I'll try to do better to keep this thing smoothed out. There's clear future here. Hopefully, it won't be so time-consuming and I don't know what you call it, just kind of keep changing. We're going to try to meet once a month. We're going to try to meet, if we can, in person. We got 2 very serious issues to work on. One is generation planning, and the other one is rate design. But it is actually the whole rate-making process. As y'all remember, we have a pretty old rate study, okay? And I think we're going to have to really look at that. Remember, that's when you get the total requirement and you split it among the different classes. That needs to be freshened up, okay? Because frankly, that step, people talk a lot about the last step as to how you actually build it. But that step, which anybody that's ever been involved in one, it's really tough. That is a very difficult step, but it's a very important step. If we don't allocate cost, remember, we are a cost recovery entity, all right? We have to recover the cost. And I know that includes the 14% to the city. It's a cost to us, you know, and so we have to recover those costs. And we don't get a choice on who we bill, how we bill. We have to follow the costs. Now, we do get a choice on how we design the bill itself. They call it the rate design, but that's confusing because it's all the way through. And we will work on that. And that's what the stuff that Peter and several other people, including Eloisa, were very good at, and we will have to do that rate design. So I'm proposing that we're going to always meet together. That was a mistake. I made a mistake when we split it up into the 3 groups. Sorry. I made lots of them here, but that was a big one. and then we pulled them back together. We also need to try to start as much as we can, as long as the pandemic allows, to meet in person. Because I think people need to get to know people, to work with people. That's just the only way I ever worked, okay? That's why I'm so clumsy with this thing, and I've made so many mistakes on it, because I'm just not used to this. But I am used to talking to people, and actually, I really feel good about that. So, even when they're fussing at me. But the point is that we've got to go in and we've got to look at the rate design, and that is everything from how we allocate cost on down, what our technology is in order to accommodate our rate design, and then we've got to get after this generation planning. These folks sitting around here have done a lot of work inside of CPS on this generation planning, but they have been stymied with politics. And as we've said time and again, we got to sweep that politics aside, and we got to look at the facts, and we got to go forward. I got a lot of folks kind of mad at me because yesterday I kind of sitting there with the city council, and I said, look, we got to go forward, and to go forward, somebody's got to be wrong. And I'm more than willing to be wrong. I've been wrong more times than not, but I've been right enough times that we'll eventually get it right. But we got to get it right together. We got to have everybody's input into it. To start with that, you got to have something up there to talk about. You can't just talk about your pet project or what your desire is. You've got to think about what the whole city needs and how we do it. And I've had lots of engineers work for me. I'm clearly not an engineer. I'm not certified to do anything, but the thing about it is that if you just ask enough questions and you put it out there long enough, you will get a good answer. Will it be optimal? I don't know, but it'll be pretty dang good. And that's what I mean is a good. It's not good, it's good. Okay? It's double good. Perfect? No. But it's good. So with that, I'm telling you that the next meeting will be the third Thursday of January. We will spend half of the meeting with a facilitator, because I'm sure not interested in doing it, with a facilitator, and we will take and develop a, if you want to call it a straw man, of how we get this generation going and get it off the dime and get going fast. And then we're going to spend an hour and a half talking about getting into how we want to approach and, frankly, clear up some misunderstandings on rate design. I've had several people very close to the council people and council people that I think when I really hear them talking, they think rate design is something that's going to magically shift costs from lower income to higher income. And it doesn't do that, okay? We can give people tools to save money. We can help them with assistance program, but there's no magic in this thing. So we'll work on those two things. And oh, by the way, I got to vote too. So on the first vote, I vote yes, and I vote because it does one thing. It stabilizes CPS. In one word, it's a stabilization. Could they maybe do it on a little less? I think Dana made some really good points. But again, when you're talking about it, I have to some extent, trust the staff here and Ben and other people, because I know it'll do that. Would a little less do it? Maybe. Would a little more do it? Maybe. But I'm very comfortable with that number. And I'm a lot better comfortable with that number than I am 13.5. And when we're on that point, please don't talk to me about bill impact, okay? Please. We don't control the bill impact. Fuel prices go up and down, okay? We can only talk about the rate increase and a charge that's a fixed charge because we're going to use a set interest rate. So I vote yes on that, and I do because it'll stabilize us. It'll stabilize us to do a plan that I want to throw out. A lot of people aren't going to like it. That's fine. I don't care. Just tell me what you don't like. We'll work on it. And that is that in 18 months, we close the Bronning steam plants. They're on their last leg. They're costing us a lot. They got to be. I mean, I don't even know the numbers, but if I had plants that old running, I'd know they'd be pretty costly. We need to go ahead and get our contract started for the solar that we received best and finals on almost a year ago. And we need to convert Spruce 2. If the numbers are right, and I confirmed them last week with Frank, if we can convert that plant for $40 million and save $60 million in water treatment costs, that's no additional capital. If y'all heard Councilman Perry yesterday, he said, how can we walk away from these plants that we can run for so long? We can only walk away from those plants if we do it without a lot of extra capital, okay? We've got to come up with a low capital, efficient process. And that, by my numbers, 60 minus 40 is a net plus 20. Then in, I think, 3 years, maybe it's longer, and that's where we'll hear from the experts, I think we can close Spruce. And I think we ought to look at going ahead and closing the Summers plants. But now we're going to have to start understanding that when we have the variability of renewables, we're going to have the variability of dispatchable power, or the availability of the variability of dispatchable power. And that means contracting perhaps for additional quick start natural gas combined cycle turbines, 750 or so, maybe the wrong number. It doesn't mean we have to own the plant. We don't own the solar plants, okay? If we do that, again, keeping the capital low. Because what we've got to get ourselves in a position to do is in 3 years, or some period of time that we'll come up with a better deal, we're in a position to take advantage as technology comes along, and we're not sitting here with high capital investment. We've got to move. That's why I'm voting for this. Because what it'll do is we purchase additional solar, we stop using coal, we increase dispatchable natural gas generators, we shut down old steam plants, and we put ourselves in a reliable position in a market by balancing renewables and quick start natural gas in a market that's an energy-only market that's brittle as can be. We're in a dangerous position here in this state. If anybody doesn't think we are, just look at the numbers. Read those twice a year. ERCOT puts that deal out. It's scary. They'll make it look good because they use a big number on availability of renewables, and sometimes it's not there. As a result, we'll have a portfolio of generation assets without investing a lot of extra capital. And then that can give us a springboard for the next 10, 12, whatever years it takes to get out of the carbon business. Sorry to go into that, but that's what we need to look at. And again, tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me how I'm crazy. The second one is the recommendation on the winter storm. Look, I have the same concerns that some other people have here. We have to do this. You finance it out. You don't necessarily pay cash for a house. We'll finance this thing out. Reality is I don't want to open up another cost. Now, it is a fuel cost, so it's legitimate. Another cost in that fuel adjustment that people don't see. Several people, including John, from the very beginning says we have to have a bill that informs. We do not have a bill that informs. When I ask, it's because we've got a 20-year-old system and we can't change it. But we've got to get a bill that informs. If we're going to pile all this stuff into the fuel adjustment, we've got to have what is actually a fuel adjustment. We've got to have, if we're going to have a STEP program, what's in the STEP program. If we have power purchase agreements, we're going to have power purchase agreements in there. We've got to take those, and I would say we need a line in there that says winter storm. We have an opportunity every month to communicate with our customers, and we don't do it. We put a flyer in there, they just throw away, but they look at the bill. And there's a lot that can be seen on that bill, and we can do it simply so all of our folks understand that bill. And my concern is that we'll see a number kind of creep in there when we accept more charges or settle more charges, and it won't be reflected to people. It'll just get approved as new debt. All of a sudden, people say, hey, my bill's gone up. And frankly, that's not acceptable to our people. That's disingenuous, and it's a little bit arrogant, okay? That's my vote, and I just have one more thing, and that is, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate working with you. And while this has been one kind of miserable time, I really appreciate you. And if we have any comments or questions, or anybody wants to talk about anything, the house is open, and not the bar, but the house is open. Go ahead.
I have some comments already. Thank you, Reed, for that short answer. And I don't, of course, agree with all of that, but a lot of it I do. And
I wouldn't expect you to agree with all of it.
so
I don't want you to.
I want to clarify a little bit to everybody here. I'm actually on CPS's side. I want them to do the right thing. And all I can do is give my experience as a businessman and, you know, and all kinds of experience around the world observing and doing things. And my point in the criticism that I've offered is to try to get CPS more efficient than I think they are. And the best example, the two examples that I used are the STEP program and the idea of paying for growth. It makes no sense from a business or accounting point of view, in my opinion. Why should you do that? And if you didn't do that, if you do these things, you could actually get your costs down. The ratepayers, in the case of the STEP program, wouldn't pay as much. It's no money to you, but it's money to us. And if you get down to the program, you get down to a base level, when then I could support what you're doing if you explain it. As a further example, the STEP program, instigated years ago, you spent maybe almost $1 billion on it. And the idea was that you were going to forego the need to build additional generating capacity. I'm not convinced that you've done that or proven that you have, because the efficiencies that you do show in the reduced amount of electricity is way more likely to be because of the growth in the city has employed newer construction, more efficient energy using equipment. So that's where the growth is coming from, and you have no way of monitoring the people that you gave money to, and it's not your money, it's our money, to weather strip and do these things. You have no way to monitor that their bills are actually lower. How can they be lower when you're raising rates? So this is my whole point. If you don't do stuff like that, you do the stuff that you really need, we could talk about the kind of plants that you need and what it does. I've asked 50 times to see the renewable rate contracts. And the reason I want to see that is so everybody can see what this thing actually costs. I don't care what it costs, but you know, we should see it. And what it does, it's subsidized by the federal government, by the state government, and by CPS. And believe it or not, that actually costs money to everybody. And so I'm not against this stuff, but let's just see what it costs and what's the best and most efficient way to do these kind of things. And this is the kind of thing that CPS should be telling this committee. You know, we shouldn't have to ask 50 times for it. And I mean, I could go on, but you know, what we need to do is get to be where we're an efficient business. And then when you go and you ask for rate increases, you know, either you get it or you don't. And then it's on the CPS city council. I mean, then it's on the city council. If they don't give you the rate increase, well, hell, you say the rating agencies are going to down, or what can you do? I don't mean to rant, guys, but you know, it's seriously, you know, it needs to be more efficient than it is, and I don't see it. Thank you,
Dana. Fema?
Yeah, I just want to add a few comments, speaking a bit more towards procedure, since we've been talking about, you know, how we do things and sometimes not fully understanding what we were here for, and finally realizing that we have these and that and those duties. Just to get things clear with all of you, I'm a vote counter. I don't care what you say, I care how you vote, and that's what matters. So you can trust me. Yesterday at the B session, I was counting the votes, and I think I shared my initial tally with somebody. I'm not going to mention the person's name. Now, on the matter of voting, and I just wanted to point this out to all of us, it's actually in our charter that the chair may decide to proceed with resolution of a given issue through a vote. So I'm looking forward to more votes. I'm not afraid of not reaching consensus, but I want us to be able to vote and speak our minds and justify why we have voted one way or the other. So I'm fully in support of, not having consensus if that's what it is, but resolving or at least making our views known through our votes. I also want to mention something since we talked about this rate increase, and I think it was in the papers that there was a impression that we were not going to be deliberating on this rate increase, this very one, and that it will be future. Again, just to clarify my understanding, it was never my view that we would not be talking about what eventually became this issue we're dealing with now, the immediate rate increase. It wasn't clearly stated in the bylaws. It simply said we will provide inputs on rate increases. It didn't say this one or the future or next. So I don't know where that thing about the future or present came from. And if somebody knows, please clarify for me. That said,
I got him right here. Hang on.
That said, I'm very glad that we got to some alignment with something that I won't say inadvertently, which probably was a brief spell of, I'll call it foresight. My very first comment was that I saw 3 time frames, a short, medium, and long-term time frame. I said that in my very last comment on our first meeting. So in my mind, I always saw this rate increase as something that would be a short-term issue. So when I began to see that alignment emerging, as in we have to deal with something immediately, we have to stabilize the patient, we have to stem the tide, choose your favorite anecdote, I knew that it was going to be a rate increase. I mean, that's pretty much it. And I want to mention what I thought was a brief moment of leadership at the B session yesterday. One of our council members simply said this: after the pandemic and after the impact of Winter Storm Uri and the various impacts that came through delinquent bills and all that, did we not expect that there will be a request for a rate increase? This is a council member essentially telling the other members of the council that, hey, we had to deal with this. So if it sounded new to anybody, I'm sorry, they were wrong. This has been an issue that had been on the table for years. So, I just wanted to mention that because I felt that was a rare moment of leadership that council member showed. And I think the other members should also take a cue from that and see that this was not exactly something that was new. It just became more important. And I think we are at that crunch moment where everybody's attention is now focused on what's coming. It's almost like, the 2 minutes drill, finals. There's something that's drawing all the attention that I think we're seeing throughout the community now, because there is a critical decision coming. And of course, I'm looking forward to seeing how the board, the city council, and other members of our community take on the discussion as we head towards, the final city council's vote. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Dr. Femi, I'll just make one comment. I was the executive sponsor that helped pull the RAC, documents together and try to get this body appointed by the board. The board recognized that, we were, potentially going to be in a rate case conversation at some point in time this year or within some, time period. So they were, certainly sensitive to putting the RAC in a position of having to vote on a rate increase. That, again, it's exactly what happened. Right? You felt rushed into having to make a conversation about, weigh into a conversation that the board and staff were having, for some time. Well, the pivot happened once the RAC got organized, to recognizing you have input, valuable input, right, to provide. And I want to thank everybody. Whether you supported it or not, doesn't matter to me. You gave your input, and that's what the RAC is about, and I appreciate that very much. So me and my team, we're here to listen because it informs how we interact with our board, how we interact with city council, and it's appreciated. So let me just say that. But we tried our very, very best to give the RAC an opportunity to provide meaningful feedback on this rate increase, because we believe that's what the community expected of us. That's what we know. That's what council expected of us, and you've done your job in that regard. So yes, you know, and that was my comment in the paper the other day. We didn't want you to feel rushed, so we weren't sure you were going to have the time you needed to weigh in on this rate increase. But we tried to set up a process that allowed you to do that anyway, because we knew that's what the community expected. And so I know it was difficult, and I know, you know, that obviously there's frustrations that reside. I think going forward, you know, we'll have more thoughtful conversations, more time, you know, to dig into the things you want to dig into. But we tried very hard to try to give you an opportunity to weigh in, you know, so I think it's both.
Al, did you have a comment?
Actually, sir, I had a question for you.
Sure.
Our comments today and the total tally of the votes and whatnot, how will it be presented to whom?
Okay, you know, and of course, I'm open for input because it's your input. So, but what I'd plan to do is have Ann compile them, print them up, so that, and you know, it might not hurt to look at the transcript and see if there's other comments made that didn't get written, but certainly take the written comments, put them together, and I don't intend to put a tally sheet in front because I want people to read your responses. We'll put a cover letter on it, and we'll send it to the Board of Trustees. That's who if you read the, whatever it is, Section 2, Article 1, we're supposed to advise them. Hopefully, that will then get passed, and I'll obviously send a copy to Rudy as the CEO, because it says we advise the trustees and management. So it'll go in two places. Then hopefully that'll get passed on to the city council, but that's not actually what it tells me to do. If that answers you, Al. Okay, yeah. Yes, Peter.
Just in preparation for next steps, I don't know if this question for Rudy, but when is the next proposed cost of service study expected? I know that's about a year process before we would see the results of that.
Well, we need to talk about that, because you can update a cost of service study, but I've done them. Y'all's must be a lot more complicated, but it needs to get started. I think we need a new one, and we certainly need one before we would ever be asked to consider a rate increase. Go ahead, Chad. I think you can answer that.
Yeah, so my tentative plan is to do one next year. I haven't cleared this with my boss, but yeah, thanks boss. We do need to do one next year because it's been a number of years since it's been updated. So.
Yeah, you'll start there in about 15, 16 days then.
Right? We will start after January, yeah.
Okay,
after
good.
the books close. In
Yeah,
January,
yeah.
so
Well, you don't have to wait till the books are closed. They can come in and start futzing around.
Is that a realistic time frame? Is it a year that it takes to produce it?
It takes about 6 months to complete.
Well, let's talk about that, because last time y'all did all the work yourself, a lot, and then it had it reviewed, right?
We did about 90% of the work ourselves, and then had it validated. Yes.
Okay. Well, let's just start.
Like anything, it can be done faster. It just makes it more expensive to do.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm not trying to push. I just think that's a real big problem, and we've got to make sure that certainly the trustees and the council people know that step, while it's very complex and kind of arcane, if you make the wrong allocations, you're going to get the wrong answer down here. We talked about that, because if you allocate too much cost to one of those categories of customers, then those individuals are going to carry a disproportional burden from what they shouldn't. And that's just not the way rate making works.
Thank you.
Anything else, Chad? Anne-Marie, just hold your hand up or give me something on the chat.
So I just want to, I'm afraid I may be making an assumption, so I just want to clarify this with you, Rudy. What I've seen in the last couple of months where our input has been taken and incorporated into everything that you've done, I want to know that that's the kind of relationship we'll have going forward. I've made that assumption, but I haven't asked it in front of everybody, and I've heard some people ask a similar question or have it be underneath something they've said.
Yeah, I think there's confusion just kind of regarding process. Your input is valuable, and I've said it in front of City Council. The conversations we've had about utility burden, I've actually been educated, quite frankly, on things I didn't know or maybe I didn't look at a certain way. And I think our entire team welcomes and certainly would expect your input to be heard and incorporated, where possible. The process, the rate case process is really laid out. I mean, the process isn't for us to come to the RAC, and ask what percentage might be, agreeable. We've got to firm up our numbers, and that's really where the gap was overall. We threw a number out there and then got aligned with the city and then came back with another number. It shouldn't work that way. And I think, Corey and Chad would agree. I know they agree because we've talked about it. The process should be to gain alignment and then start talking to the community about it, and then go and have a conversation with council. So, we should have done step 2 that we took first, because the city is our regulator. We have to, get our numbers right, and then we got to go firm them up with the city, and then we got to start talking about it in the community. The city, our city regulator, asked us to stop talking about a number until we got aligned, and they were right to do so. So anybody who feels disrespected in some form or fashion because we didn't start here. The process isn't to start here. The process is to get aligned, to talk to our board on where we are, and then begin the process of community outreach. This committee serves as a source of community input. That is what your purpose is. Community input for us, community input for our board. And council is going to be interested in that input as well, even though you don't have a formal relationship to council. You're appointed by council members. Brenda, I'm glad you're talking to Councilwoman Villagran because she needs to know what you think. So hopefully that kind of lays it out. But we take comments from the CAC, we take comments from the RAC. I'll be at every town hall meeting, with our council members, and we'll get feedback there, and all of that gets incorporated into the conversation. The vote that happens at the board and at city council. All of that factors into that perspective.
Great, thanks, Rudy. Also, I just want to make a comment that in my experience, a lot of times.
A little closer, Anne-Marie.
Sorry, you start with a vision, right? And you're walking along that path, and then the reality sets in, and you have to adjust. And that's part of what happened with us in this process. And so I just would like to acknowledge that, because for me, it helps me be kinder with myself and then kind of be kinder with others too. And also, I just want to say, hearing comments about leadership and things that have happened. People resign, people retire, things change. It's difficult when you see it at a kind of a wholesale level, not just talking about CPS. Again, Anne-Marie's experience in life. But one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm not going to say it's an absolute thing, but what happens then is other people are given an opportunity to step up. And they're independent. You know, they may have been working under other folks, but that doesn't mean they're not clones, you know? They have their own things to contribute, and then they have the opportunity to do that. So that's what I'm looking forward to in these changes. And I'm looking forward to hearing from new people with new ideas and new perspectives and new responses to just what we're doing here. Thank you.
Well, Emery, let me jump back to your first comment, which is really important. We clearly didn't drive this process. You know, we were jumping off the dock trying to catch a boat sometimes. So, you know, I think it'll change a little bit. It will change a little bit in the future, not I think. I think it is, as we as a committee set our agenda, then we can set how we're communicated with and on an appropriate time. And that's what I'm trying to start putting in place going forward. If I mess up, somebody doesn't like what I'm doing, just say, Reed, you all got my phone number, call me. And we'll make an adjustment, or I'll explain myself. It's not that hard, but my job's to set the agenda, and I think it was very hard to set an agenda in a process that was extremely fluid. And in some respects, as is pointed out by several people today, rushed, okay? Now, if you are going to a PUC like I used to have to go to, you're talking about a year-long process. You know, you present information, you then have people make testimony, you have hearings. It's a very long process. This is a kind of a different process. It's more like a hometown process, and so it was rushed, and it had lots of bends and crooks, and I can tell you I didn't do that good job keeping up. And I probably didn't do that good job keeping y'all up. But going forward, if we're talking about two things, one which is generation planning, and the other one which really is the whole rate design all the way through, okay, as well as, then we can set our agenda, and I think everybody can get comfortable with where we are and that everybody's on the same page. And if we don't do that, then we're losing the effectiveness and efficiency of the organization. So I'll work hard to do that. And I expect that if I'm not doing it some way, I expect somebody will tell me. Okay? Yep. Anybody else? Yes, Michael, please.
Just one quick question. I know we're going to be doing rate design and generation planning on parallel tracks. Is one going to take priority over the other, though? Is there one that we need to get done first while we're doing these in parallel tracks?
Well, I have my feeling. I'm sure other people have other feelings, but I believe that we got to get started on this generation planning, and I know we've got to do the rate design, and that takes time. But I do believe these processes can be moved forward parallel. Okay.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I don't see we go sequentially on these things. Anything else? Looks like Femi? All right.
Yeah, just following on Mike's comments. Yes, I think it's good to go in parallel, because I feel at some points we will be feeding off of each other. You know, if there are two committees or there are three, I don't know how we're going to do it, but if we have two tracks, they're not going to be two independent tracks. They're going to be feeding off each other, especially if we start doing some of those assessments that needs to be done, simulations, models, or whatever we want to do. You know, there's going to be a feed. Those two are going to feed each other. A decision has to be made, I think, or we have to reach some kind of an end point quickly. But I still come back to my time frame concern. A rate structure can change in 2 years, can change in 5 years, but your generation planning will have to look on the order of 15, 20, 25 years forward.
Right.
So those time frames have to be borne in mind, and how do you blend those two together? It's something we're going to have to discuss. And as I said, we may disagree. So, Reid, you might have to vote again. But I also want to mention something that, in terms of communication, this is this is the right time to say, let's start to get that communication with the community in place early. If we have to go occasionally on an interim basis, speak to the board, address the city council, B sessions and all that, it's good to do that. Let's carry the community with us so that when we get to a point of an outcome or a decision, it doesn't appear new, and there's evidence that it's not new to those who are going to be making the decision.
Right, I agree. Anything else? Anyone else? Anything else? Wait a minute, I've got somebody coming in here. Okay. Let's see. Hang on, we're not finished. I'm trying to. What's the reluctance to vote? No reluctance to vote. I can tell you how they voted. Hang on a minute. Let's see. Let me get the. Oh, I don't have the sheet here. What do we have, Ann? That's on the first. And what's on the second one?
19 for, 1 abstain.
Okay, 19 for, 1 abstain. Okay, yeah, there's the tally. Now I'm getting a message here. Can we read ahead packages? Mike, why don't you ask your question? I'm not sure I'm going to get it across slide here.
All right, I'm just asking if we can get a, and I missed the wrong date there, but it's January 22. If we can get a read-ahead packet ahead of time, well ahead of time, perhaps this month, if not by the first week of January for the next RAC meeting on the 20th.
Right.
You know, bottom line is the sooner the better.
Okay. No, I agree. We will start putting out information and getting feedback before the meeting. Yes, absolutely. Good point. Anything else?
Reid, I did hear you say, this is Jim.
Yeah, Jim.
That 19-1 on the second vote. What was the tally on the first vote on the rate increase?
It was 12-6, 2 abstaining. Sorry, I wasn't making that clear.
12-6 against?
12 for, 6 against, 2 abstained.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And the second one was 19 for, 1 abstain. If I got that right. Okay. Anything else? All right. We're adjourned. Thank you all.